everyone. Welcome to another episode of Cosmic Conversations. I am your host, Marla Martinson, and I have a really juicy topic for you today. I'm with Dr. Stephanie Mines, who wrote the book, We Are All in Shock. And aren't we all in shock? Oh my gosh. Dr. Stephanie Mines is the author of 5 books that reflect over 3 decades of research as a neuroscientist. She has investigated shock and trauma as a survivor, a professional, a clinical researcher, and healthcare provider. And she's also developed climate change and consciousness to facilitate inner transformation for grounded climate action. So welcome, Stephanie. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Marla, for inviting me.
Yes, this is such an amazing topic. I mean, it's called, We Are All in Shock, Energy Healing for Traumatic Times. And it does feel like we're really in traumatic times, but if we look back, there's always something traumatic happening throughout history. And as I was going through your book, I mean, everything from even being born, you know, there's a lot of shocks that we have. So why don't you share with us what brought you to write this book? What was the inspiration for this topic?
Thank you. Yes, I originally wrote this book prior to the pandemic, and it is updated with new interventions that are designed specifically for our current situation. When I wrote the book, originally, I was addressing my clientele, my practice, the area that I was focusing on, the multiple areas that had drawn me to them, and that ran the gamut from sexual abuse survivors, survivors of domestic violence. I worked deeply with the AIDS epidemic and the people affected by that. That cumulative exposure to the magnitude of shock and trauma in our culture was what drew me to feel so enthusiastic about sharing the resources that I had discovered as a survivor of some of those conditions, sexual abuse, domestic violence, what had really transformed my nervous system, and I realized was so valuable for others. I was just passionate, really, to share these interventions that have no contraindications. And as a neuroscientist who studied the response of the nervous system to overwhelming experience, I knew through the clinical testing that I had done that these were safe and effective interventions. So I really couldn't restrain myself from writing the book. And then as our global situation has accelerated in response to climate change, in response to the pandemic, the awareness of the incredible utility of what I had to offer expanded. And there we have the new edition of We Are All in Shock.
Right, and what a coincidence when it was coming out, then this happened, you know, this big shock to everyone. And the energy healing, the energy work in here, is that, I'm thinking that's not typical of like a neuroscientist, what they would be into, or?
You are so right. Yes, that is the cutting edge and the treasure, really, of what it is that I have to offer. So the reason that I became involved with energy medicine was really on the surface serendipitous, just encountering actually through my colleagues in the healthcare professions. There was an awareness of energy medicine, and I learned about it from them. And because I was a scientist and at that time pretty much of an academic, this was not an area that I would normally have ventured into, but people I trusted began to inform me about the applications of energy medicine, and they were my friends, they were my close peers, and I decided to try them. And as a survivor of sexual abuse and domestic violence in my own family life, I always felt the need for greater alignment, greater centeredness. And I found these energy medicine interventions to be incredibly effective. And that just caught my attention because I'm acutely sensitive to the nervous system, to my own nervous system. As a survivor of what I've described, I've had to really work to be able to perform and function in the spheres that I chose for my career. So I really track myself, I monitor myself very well. And this has created a heightened sensitivity to what is happening in the mind-body communication systems. So when these energy medicine applications were so effective, I knew it. And that made me just incredibly enthusiastic. And I began to share those interventions then with the trauma survivors who were coming to me for resources.
Oh, that's wonderful. And then you can teach it to them so that they can apply it on themselves. And
that's the beauty here. This is really center stage, that all of these interventions are self-care interventions. Mm-hmm. This is highlighted at this time, Marla, because our situation is very tenuous in terms of access to healthcare resources. If we can make this leap in our consciousness to understand that we have the capacity in our own hands, in our own minds, to really bring the nervous system into an evolutionary resilient state, this will make a huge difference, will diminish panic. The rates of insomnia right now are off the charts. If people can access and trust their own capacity to be in the center of their own healthcare, we will make a paradigm shift that will bring us to a new level for humanity.
Yes, and I love energy healing. I'm a Reiki practitioner, and I, kind of do my own freestyle stuff too and bring it through. And I do some distance healing. And a friend of mine had a UTI, a urinary tract infection. She wasn't feeling good, and she had emailed me. She says, "Can you tonight do some energy work?" And so I did a half an hour distance. The next day, she said she went to the doctor, and she had no sign of it, and they gave her some antibiotics, but she didn't need it. And so I was like, oh my God, it could have cleared up on its own, I guess, but it was a pretty quick turnaround, and maybe it accelerated it, or, it really.
Well, that's what I noticed. That's what I noticed. And there actually is science behind that, Marla. That's not just a coincidence or something that you can't really track and name. There is science behind how stress diminishes the immune response and heightens inflammatory response. So these interventions, and also I would add, because I know it's pertinent, the love, the compassion, the sincerity, the faith, the heart-to-heart connection that you had with your friend, that contributed. And that also is scientifically proven. If we need science to back up what common sense, traditional wisdom tells us, which is the chemistry between two people in a healing dynamic plays a role in the healing dynamic. So that adds to the de-stressing and to the neurohormonal response.
And I'm curious what you have to say on this. I know a couple of people who just cannot accept the fact that distance healing works, that sending it distance, there's no, science on that, or there's no facts, it can't work, you have to be in person. But I've been doing it a long time, and I know people will let me know, oh, I felt the heat, I felt tingling, I felt somebody touch my shoulder during it. Do you have anything scientifically to say about that?
I do. And it comes from the science of the natural world. Mm-hmm. So do you know that tree roots communicate with each other globally throughout the world? So that means that communication transcends time and space when that intention is there. So that is one piece of evidence in the natural world. Another piece of evidence is in the incredible research into epigenetics. So we know, it has been well documented, that epigenetic conditions shape genetic expression, and this is transmitted intergenerationally. And therefore, the impact of experience transcends time and space. That's another way to document how distant healing works.
And for someone who doesn't know what epigenetics means, that word, what is that?
Yes, thank you. So epigenetics, the actual etiology of the word is above genetics or beyond genetics. So these are life experiences. Perhaps the best research has been done by a woman named Rachel Yehuda, who studied the intergenerational impacts passed on from Holocaust survivors. She also studied the epigenetics of responses to the 9/11 terrorist attack. So how the feelings, the emotions, the thought patterns, the immune and nervous system responses of survivors of these horrific events were passed on not only to their children, but to their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. And in fact, a study like that is included in my research.
Interesting. And I have heard many stories of people with cancer. For instance, Deborah King, she's a Hay House author, and she had cancer and she went to get energy healing. She hadn't heard of it before, but she went, and after a few sessions, the cancer just went away. And then that led her on her life mission of traveling around the globe, studying energy healing and all of that, and then teaching it to others. And I have heard of many times when energy healing did make it like a miraculous recovery.
Well, let's define energy healing. I think
let's define it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, let's get specific about what is energy healing.
Yeah.
So in my applications, my understanding, and my training, energy healing refers to the bioelectrical fields that occur within the human body. These bioelectrical fields are traceable. They are, in fact, the subject of X-rays, of fMRIs, of CAT scans. What that technology does is follow and report on bioelectrical conductivity through the human body. So this is a great contribution that Western medicine has made through the development of these instruments. And in fact, these instruments have contributed enormously to our understanding of how energy medicine works, because it can be tracked using this technology. But long before there was this technology in traditional original medicines, these bioelectrical fields were tracked in pulse reading. So in Tibetan medicine, in Ayurvedic medicine, in almost all the Oriental medicines, acupuncture, etc., pulse reading is using the hands to read bioelectrical conductivity and then redirecting that conductivity when it's deleterious, when it's not providing the resource and fluidity and structural harmony that it's intended to if it goes awry, which is what happens with trauma. So trauma, whether it's an emotional trauma, abuse trauma, or a physical accident, it disturbs human bioelectricity. So in traditional medicines, you can address that by redirecting that energy using your hands. Now, I have nothing but respect for how Western medicine comes to the aid of people in acute situations using technological resources when the magnitude of disruption is extreme and acute. But I do know also from my direct experience, also working with people with cancer, people who have suffered extreme trauma and abuse, that we can intervene in that bioelectrical conductivity using gentle methods, using methods that have no contraindications, using methods that are in fact human-based and self-care based, so that there can be continuity in terms of correcting and beyond correcting damages. This is what really excites me, Marla. Beyond correcting from an injury or an assault, we can evolve. We can go to a higher level of human response. Evolutionary resilience is what I call it. And we have that capacity. It's built in to human development. And this is what excites me, because it is so needed. This consciousness of evolutionary resilience is so needed right now, because we are being assaulted by information that is really scary, really scary. And people have a right to be frightened and threatened. Mm-hmm. Our circumstances are quite difficult right now.
Right.
And we need to be protective and proactive, but we can also meet those circumstances with an evolutionary response. And the main way to do that is through the human nervous system, by evoking a non-panicked, centered, and aligned state that then leads to new problem-solving developments. That's what I offer, really, and that's what I am passionate about in my work with energy medicine, in my work with trauma, and also through climate change and consciousness, which is designed to fuse this evolutionary resilience with climate action.
Right. And not only, I mean, the big things that put us into trauma, whether we're abused or held up at gunpoint or whatever, just even going on social media and having some people say, you know, the trolls saying horrible things, typing, you know, as a comments, just things like that. It's constant little, you know, or somebody unfriending you because you voted for the other person, or, you know, there's little things that we just shock our system constantly, right? That
oh my God, I hadn't even
run through.
I hadn't even thought of that, but yes, yeah, because all of those experiences are activating. You know, they're activating. Usually, what's happening is they're activating an earlier trauma.
Okay, right. If something pushes our buttons, if we get activated by it, it's because there's something in the background, or because that hasn't been cleared or resolved.
Exactly. There's a vulnerability. Yeah. And it's when we address that vulnerability that we're able to go into that space of evolutionary resilience. Mm-hmm. That's really what the case studies in my book are all about. Mm-hmm. How we can access what that original vulnerability is and repattern it, and thereby clear enormous amounts of consciousness space to enter the present moment, come into the present, stop living in the past, which is what activation is, step into the present, and then we can make a contribution for the evolution of humanity, which is what the times call for.
So I want to get into some of these things. You have illustrations and photos in the book on, you know, where to touch yourself, doing some of this stuff. And I want to share now. I did love just doing this brings you present. And I like that, because sometimes I'll do that and it really makes you more centered, and then you can calm down and slow down and get your point across, is what you were saying.
This is one of my absolute favorites and most often used. This is called an inju. So the word that you might associate with it is mudra. Similar. Comes from the same understanding of hand posture. So this, which many people associate with prayer, which is a great association, but the meaning behind the potency of this is that you are actually connecting all the meridian systems, all the energy pathways, bioelectrical pathways of your mind body through this posture. So the connective tissue of each finger, so there's real contact between the palms and all the fingers. And then actually where you place this inju can make a difference. So when you place it here, as you just did, you're actually centering your voice.
It's in front
when you
of
place it here,
throat chakra. Yeah.
yes, and you place it here, you're evolving your visionary thinking. When you place it here, you're opening the heart center. So you can literally place the inju in the position where you need help. And this is wonderfully aligning. I use this inju often when I'm teaching because I would say one of my challenges is that you can see it even in this interview, I get so excited because I'm so eager to share so much, and I have so much to share. Well, that can have the experience of flooding, and you can have difficulty in focusing when you're flooded with information. This gets me out of that trap every time.
I think of those Bollywood movies where they do this. Up there, maybe they're up in the crown chakra.
Well, I would say that originates with ancient Indian dance, Bharatanatyam, and other forms of Kathakali, other forms of Indian dance that are sacred. Those are not entertainment, even though, of course, Bollywood is very entertaining, but the origins of those movements are sacred teachings. So I don't think that is an incorrect thing that you're positing there about those hand positions in those dances.
Yeah, and they do all these mudras, these things, and it's really cool. In Persian dancing too, and all those, Eastern things, they bring that into it. It's so beautiful.
They're transmitting wisdom. There is ancient wisdom being transmitted through those dances. That's so astute of you to recognize that, Marla, really.
So I have to ask this. So some of these things that you have in here, and I'll have you, share a few more, but they'll actually, so that you can actually clear, because as a matchmaker and a coach, I get a lot of people coming to me, singles, and they've had trauma, whether it was abuse or maybe their spouse was verbally abusive or a narcissist or an alcoholic, or they're just kind of traumatized and afraid to open their hearts again, or they have to release the past person, or they can't release their ex. They're wondering when they if they're going to come back. Because I do intuitive readings too, so they'll come and say, is my ex, he's already with somebody else, but is he still thinking about me? Is he going to come back? And just this panic, and I just so want to help these women. Now, is there some of these energetic teachings here, these movements and these positions, will they clear trauma like that, or I'd love to learn some of how to clear it so that they can move forward. Is that possible?
Beautiful. What a wonderful way to use this system. So I just reflecting on what you're saying, what occurs to me is the incredible power that's here for these individuals who come to you, Marla, in terms of what's really behind their distress and this activation. And the potential here for you as their guide, as their mentor, to allow these circumstances to be transformed into a situation of empowerment for these individuals. So their preoccupation with the past, or the threat of repetition, is pointing to a vulnerability within them that diminishes their confidence that they deserve and have every right to have a healthy, happy, joyous, sensuous soulmate who will really meet them where they are. So they have a past experience where the opposite happened, where they thought perhaps at some early stage that they had that, and then it all went south. And the fear is that could happen again. If it happened once, if it happened twice, if there was abuse, there's a real sense of threat that this could occur again. So understanding that those previous circumstances were magnetized by a part in them that was not fully aligned with their worthiness. That their worthiness and their shame, even shame about having had those experiences, are the product of vulnerability that probably goes far back into their lives, and that it is possible to not repeat those circumstances by entering a state of self-respect, of worthiness, and celebration of who one is. So this Inju, and then I think you saw in my book, one of the major interventions that I use is called the main central vertical flow. I think you were even showing an illustration from it that starts like this, and even just this beginning, just the crown of the head and the prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
That will launch that energy alignment. So it's a step beyond the Inju. The Inju is actually a mirror of this. And then you proceed down through the midline of the body in sites that are depicted in the book. And those sites, when you contact them, and all you have to do is touch them. This is just a very light touch. There's no pressure or tapping involved. And even just this is gorgeous. I love staying here. This really eases the mind. It enhances memory and immediately brings you into that central channel. So that central channel that circulates down the front of the body and up the back of the body, that's your alignment. And that brings you into your center, into this midline, which is your support structure. So the individual who has this fear of traumatic repetition, stepping into the present through the main central vertical flow, or even just the first step of the main central vertical flow, or the Inju, will find themselves differentiating the past from the present. And they'll realize that that threat that occurred before will not occur again if they step into their worthiness, because they won't allow it. So the difference between the past and the present is their consciousness.
Right. And because frequency is always matched, right? So if we are attracted to somebody who ends up to be jealous or cheating or whatever, even if we think, oh no, I'm ready, I'm this and that, the frequency is somewhere, that frequency is matching for them to be brought together, right?
Yeah, sometimes in those situations, having been in those situations myself, the match has to do with the vulnerability that, for instance, a narcissist is going to be attracted to someone with whom his narcissism or her narcissism will succeed.
Usually the empath, right? The empath and the narcissist.
Yes, exactly. Someone whose vulnerability or their empathy, their kindness, their open-heartedness has never had the necessary protections that are needed to support the magnitude of love and care that is contained within that empathy. That empathy may be, excuse the word, but a little sloppy. It may be just all over the place. And that empathy needs to be focused, directed, and honored and respected in oneself. And actually, there are sites that enhance that self-support and protection. And I'm just going to shift my camera. So I'm wrapping my fingers around the bicep. So my thumb is on the inner seam of the bicep,
Okay.
And my other fingers, it doesn't matter which ones, are falling on the outer seam of the bicep. And doing that both left and right. And then you can relax your arms. I'm just raising my elbows to illustrate. So these sites, sacred site high 19, and in the book you get a beautiful map that shows you the number and the name of all the sites. These sites are really good boundaries. And even just looking at you, Marla, as you're holding these sites, you look fantastic.
Oh.
You look so elegant. It's like you just got a little taller.
Yeah.
And your chest opened a little more, and your shoulders dropped, and you look really elegant. And these sites invite boundaries. They invite the capacity to say no when it's appropriate to say no. And my teacher called these sites your bodyguards. So it's wonderful to be empathic and compassionate, but we want to be empathic and compassionate intelligently with self-respect.
I'm a boundary coach. I just became I studied for a whole year with Nancy Levin, and specializing in boundaries. So this is great. I could add this in. This is so fun.
Totally. And this site has a corollary, which is in the bend of the elbow.
Uh-huh.
So this site and these sites, these are actually two sites wrapping around the bicep, but in the bend of the elbow, that site can also be held, and you can hold them alternately.
Mm-hmm.
These are the boundary sites, the bodyguard sites.
Mm-hmm. And so when would you do this?
Well, I do it as a regular practice.
Just like you're sitting there, maybe watching TV, and you just do it because it's activating, it's clearing, whatever it needs to do.
Yeah, I will do it if my boundaries are called into question. Mm-hmm. These sites also, on the structural level, they will support your spine because you're supporting yourself. Mm-hmm. So support also has a structural corollary, a structural ramification. So back problems are potentially an advertisement that one needs support. So you give yourself support. So this will actually also help your back as well. So if I have back distress, mm-hmm. if I feel that I'm in danger of letting my boundaries slip because someone has appealed to me to do something that causes me to overextend, and I feel this is a common one for me because I'm a generous person. So I'm often, being asked to overextend and give more than is really intelligent for me to give. And it's up to me to decide whether I'm going to do that or not. And these sites will support me.
Okay, so as someone, let's say someone's calling you and they want extra time, a free session, or something where you've overgiven, and before you're going to answer, you would do this for a few minutes.
Exactly.
And then that gives you your boundary, helps you with that emotionally.
Yes, and we can even put it into a very mundane context. Uh-huh. So, so often parents are in the situation where their children are just asking them for this and asking them for that, and they want this and they want to do that. And the parents are so wanting to support their children being all that they can be, but they know that this is not necessarily in the child's best interest to have all this or do all this. So the parent feels pulled, to, be very generous and supportive of the child. But the containment is actually what the child is looking for. The child actually unconsciously wants their parent to set limits to what they can have and do. So the parents can just hold
They do. Anyway, that looks like yes. a mom, like, what did I tell you?
But you do it with consciousness, and then, your response is not, no, of course you can't do that. Yeah. Your response is, no, we don't do that here. No, you already had that yesterday, and it's not going to be beneficial for you. You give an explanation, you give understanding. The child may still rebel, but the parent is in a more grounded and centered space, and they're not delivering anger. And that makes a huge difference.
This energy work, it's having me yawn. It's interesting. I'm keep wanting to yawn now from doing that.
That's wonderful, Marla. That means that you're making space for yourself. That's the
Oh my God.
response. That's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, just look at the yawn. It's you're making more space for your breath.
Yeah.
And that's actually the outcome of these sites.
Mm-hmm.
Another way to think of boundaries is making space for you. So you're limiting the space that others are acquiring in your space, and you're making more space for yourself. You're defining your space. So
And what's interesting is as a boundary coach, I've learned that people often think boundaries, it's for the other person to hold. Like you say, it's making somebody else do something, where it's not. It's us deciding what we will and will not accept, what we will and will not do for ourselves, and how we're going to take care of ourselves, and then for us to hold what we will and will not do, not telling the other person what they have, So this is
beautiful.
all great, just working with ourselves and holding that boundary.
Exactly. And if we
the other person's going to cross it.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's not their boundary, so of course they're going to cross it. So we have to cross it.
We have to define it.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. Yeah.
That's amazing. We're talking about boundaries. Okay, so what are a couple of other energy, points, and let's talk about a couple other ones we could share. I love this.
Yeah. So I would like to share something very simple that keep yawning. It's
funny because in our culture, if you yawn, somebody thinks, oh, you find me boring, or are you bored, or whatever, but it's not. It's just we need more oxygen, or we're doing something, releasing, or
I see it as a very healthy response.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you're making more space for yourself, Marla.
Good. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. And what are we doing?
Yeah, I'd like to share something very basic and simple, and this is completely covered in the book, but I think it's really worth demonstrating. It's a very simple practice. Anybody can do it anywhere, anytime, and it has to do with the hands, the fingers.
Okay.
So you can hold each finger in a very simple way. So just literally like this, wrapping, like putting your finger into a muff is one of the ways I think about it. Letting the finger rest in the palm of the opposite hand. So each finger is a channel elementally. In other words, it is a hologram through the connective tissue that speaks directly to the spinal column, is a transmitter from the connective tissue in the finger up the spinal column. Each finger communicates about a different state and a different biological process and function. So let's start with the thumb. So literally just holding the thumb. So let's just do that for a moment. Just feel the thumb resting in the palm of the opposite hand, and I'm closing my eyes just so to tune in a little more. And what am I feeling for? I'm feeling for a subtle sensation of pulse that is rising up into the palm of the opposite hand. And I am also just tracking my breath, which is deepening. I'm tracking my entire nervous system, which is settling. And the thumb, in fact, is a conduit, a channel bioelectrically for the earth element. And there are two meridian pathways that form the earth element, and that is the stomach and the spleen meridians. And what the stomach and spleen meridians do when they're balanced, and you are balancing both meridians simply by holding your thumb, they allow you to release worry. The yawning that you're doing is an earth element expression. Making more space for yourself shows that worry, anxiety is being released. This also improves your digestion. So it's a polyvagal system toner. Polyvagal system unites digestion with the heart and the brain. So you're speaking to your polyvagal system and releasing worry. The index finger, doing the same thing with the index finger, just wrapping it, letting it rest in the palm of the opposite hand. This is the water element, kidney and bladder meridians. This one, if you only hold one finger, I recommend that you would hold the index finger. This is your anti-inflammatory and your immune system tonification. Freedom from fear and panic. So experiment with this. I have experimented with it a lot, working in domestic violence shelters for women who have panic attacks.
Yeah.
This is your panic attack treatment.
Wow.
So you can use this also, Marla, with your boundaries and your matchmaking. People who are in panic because they remember how their previous relationship was so destructive, ask them to hold the index finger.
Okay. And how long do you typically hold it?
As I mentioned, you track the pulsation, which you may or may not feel. Your breath deepens. It's variable, but a few minutes, a minute, the contact is turning on the conductivity.
This is so exciting. I can't wait to use all of this stuff. This is a game changer. It really is.
Yeah, that you see, you're getting the excitement. That's how I feel. It's like I can't wait. Yeah.
Gosh, these simple things that could shift things in your body. It's amazing.
They do shift things in your body. That's what convinced me.
Right. And where did you, now I saw Donna Eden gave you a blurb in here, did you learn anything from her, or was she somebody you met along the way, or what's?
Donna Eden and I are friends, Donna and her husband, David. And actually we have studied with some of the same people. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of common mentors. Okay. So Donna studied with my teacher, Mary Eno Burmeister, who taught me many of these interventions. And she also studied with others. I'm also an embryologist, so I understand the origins of energy systems from conception forward. And Donna has studied some of that same material. So we're pals.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, Donna Eden is like a legend in the energy healing, energy medicine field. And so has it been many, many years that you have been into this energy healing? How many years when did you get into this?
Well, I first encountered this energy healing, as I mentioned, in my career. It is over 35 years. Mm-hmm. I'm 76, mm-hmm. And I am someone who really counters the false advertising about maturity and elderhood. Mm-hmm. Because I find that I am more and more resilient all the time, as opposed to in any state of deterioration. The opposite is happening. The wisdom systems are flourishing within me, and I have a lot of resilience and vibrancy, and I attribute that really to these practices.
Wow. Yeah, you are. You're totally vibrant, and you just, it's like you don't even think of age with you. It's just like you're just this vibrant being or something,
Oh, thank you. And I don't tend to think of people in terms of age, actually. I mean, I have students and colleagues that run the whole spectrum of age, and I really relate to them all quite equally.
Right. And with all this spiritual work I've been doing for so many years, it's more, I'll just look at everybody as a divine spark, a spirit, and this is just our meat suit. So it's more that way.
Beautiful.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have a question before I let you go. Is there anything we can do to open up our the third eye or intuitive abilities? Any, energy work for that or?
Beautiful. Yeah. I am going to show you sacred site number 4, which is at the occipital lobe. Mm-hmm. So if you go to the base of your cranium,
Mm-hmm.
there's lobes at the perimeter there, right and left
Where
side.
there's kind of a bump back there, like.
That's right, yes. Sacred site number 4 opens up the channel of the traditional wisdoms that are being made available to you through your connective tissue. So the ancient deep time wisdom traditions, intelligence and insight that flows through you. And you can actually hold both of those lobes, in other words, cradle the entire base of the cranium with the palm of one hand, and then hold this site on the prefrontal cortex. These sites, which are the right and left sacred site number 20, and then of course these also have middle sites. So we're holding the right and left and center sites of 4 and 20. So 4 is a gateway, and 20 is your antenna.
This is 20, this in the
Yeah,
front.
20s are the ones right above the ridge of the eyebrow on the prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
So right above
Uh-huh.
the eyebrow, you're actually cradling that whole area
Okay.
with simultaneously holding the base of the cranium.
Okay.
This is allowing that wisdom tradition, many traditions very likely, that flow up the back into your intelligence and then down the front into your body. And this is also a polyvagal tone amplifier because you rest in the security and the safety of the wisdom that flows through you, and you access it by holding these sites.
And back here, that's where we get the clairaudience, right? In the back of the head, so that can
That,
open that.
yes, that another way that area is defined is as a gateway. Yeah, it's what's coming up into your awareness.
And what's polyvagal? Is that what you said?
Yes, the polyvagal system, the polyvagal nerve is the 10th cranial nerve, and it unites the functions of the brain, the heart, and digestion, and the entire cranial nerve system. There are 12 cranial nerves, and they inform our ability to express our truth and also to communicate it to others. So the whole social engagement system is wanting to be on, wanting to be alive and vibrant when you want to move into leadership and relationship that moves you forward in your evolution.
Yes, and a lot of my viewers like to find out how to open up their, psychic abilities and things like that. So that's probably just doing it every day.
This is a beauty, along with the other resources in my book. And I also, Marla, I do have training programs, and they're open to everyone. And there are several coming up quite soon at the introductory level. And I welcome you and your viewers through my website. They can find out about these programs. Some of them are no charge. Some of them are available as a public service.
Oh, beautiful. And do you have certification in some of these?
Absolutely.
Certified in doing this? And
yes, you can enter into a certification process. Absolutely. And that is mentored by me personally.
Oh, how exciting. All right. And I have your website up, but it's www.tara-approach.org. Is that the best?
That's it.
Tara, T-A-R-A. So it's flashing up on the screen. So that's great. So Dr. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining me on Cosmic Conversations. This has been so magical and so great. And everybody,
I loved it.
Please leave your comment below and let us know if you've done any energy medicine, energy healing, any experience with that, what your thoughts are, and we'd love to hear from you. And check out Dr. Mind's site. And much love to you all. Bye.
Thank you, Marla. Thank you.